Good afternoon. We have with us this afternoon Mr. David Thomas, retired chairman and CEO of IMS and former senior executive with IBM. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
What are the characteristics of a great leader?
Well, there's obviously people have a lot of opinions on that. I'll start with the fact that, first of all, integrity is assumed. I mean, if people don't trust you, you don't have a chance to be a leader. But assuming that you have that, I think the most important characteristic is just clarity. Being very clear in how you communicate, what you communicate to the people that you're trying to lead. Turns out to be the critical factor, because if you don't get that done right, it just won't work. I think another attribute that I think is important to a very effective leader is being accountable. Not only accountable for the results, but accountable for setting high standards, for not accepting okay work. And also, you know, a lot of people will talk sometimes about, well, the team didn't listen, or they didn't buy in, or they didn't get it. Well, if you're a great leader, you take accountability for that. If they didn't listen, it's because you weren't interesting enough. If they don't get it, it's because you weren't clear enough. So I think that accountability is one thing that really differentiates a lot of leaders from others. And you know, those are the two, I think, that are most critical to being an effective leader, because being a leader is about convincing other people to take an action. And so, you know, communicating that to them and taking accountability for those results turns out to be the critical things. One I would probably add that don't fit a lot of leaders, I think, is just having a sense of balance in their life too. I think that's an important thing, because if you can't have a sense of humor, laugh at yourself sometimes, it's very difficult for people to really be attracted to you as a leader, I believe.
What are the greatest challenges you've faced as a leader?
Well, a lot of challenges, a lot of different business challenges, and each business has its own set. I think, though, in terms of becoming a leader, I think the first biggest challenge I had was just developing my own confidence level. I mean, you come out of college, you think you're pretty smart, but you don't know how it's going to work in the business world. And so that was something that took a while to develop. And I think it really comes from trying to do a good job, and then other people developing confidence in you. But that probably was the hardest thing to come by, to really feel comfortable that, you know, people were looking to you for that leadership. You know, you don't decide you're a leader; other people decide it. So, but you got to have a certain confidence for people to have confidence in your leadership, I think. And I think another key challenge you face in any leadership position, at least I did, and maybe it's my industrial engineering background, but the idea of incrementalism, just trying to make things a bit better, when many times you got to step back and say, we need a bolder approach. And I think I was guilty of that at times, as just being a little bit too incremental about how I went about trying to fix businesses or fix things that were happening. But there were many challenges. We had challenges in the PC business in IBM. Certainly challenges. One of your big challenges when you first become a manager and you try to figure out, well, how are you going to impact these people? How do you make them better? Those are hard, but the early ones are the hardest, I think.
How did your engineering education prepare you for leadership?
Well, first of all, I think it did very well, and I think the people in engineering today are fortunate in the fact that's where the jobs are today, so that's all a good thing. But I think first and foremost is just the ability to attack a complex problem. I mean, you learn complex problem skills, how to break apart a problem to get at the core things you need to fix. I think those are very critical skills. Obviously, the technical training. I was in technology businesses my whole career, so just having the ability to be able to relate to key challenges in software development or microprocessor design. I mean, I wasn't going to do it, but at least I could relate to the challenges that the team was facing. I think those were very valuable in terms of that. The discipline about how you learn, the fact that everything's graded, all those things I think are excellent training. A couple things though that I think maybe I didn't, that probably weren't lessons I should have learned, and that is, you know, in engineering you think, first of all, logic wins all the time, and you think if you've got a problem and you apply a methodology to that problem, an answer will come out. Or if you just collect enough data, an answer will come out. Well, in the real world, you never have enough data. You never have all the facts. You can't combine everything. You've got to make some calls. And it's learning how to understand when you've got sufficient data and you got to make a call, and then you make a decision and you make it be the right one.
What other methods of leadership development were important in your growth as a leader?
Well, if I think about if you go back to my definition of leadership, which is convincing other people to take an action, I think the greatest training I got was my first job when I was a salesman. Of course, we call it marketing training because nobody wanted to be a salesman, but I was a salesman. And I think just having to convince customers to take actions, particularly because you're new, you're young, you're talking to people that have a lot more experience and seniority to you. And I think that's when you start to develop skills about understanding how you impact people, how you communicate. I think that was vital to me. My first manager actually told me he was going to keep me in the job longer than normal, so I would learn that skill very well, and he felt like it would help me accelerate through jobs further on in my career, and that's really what happened, because I really had good instincts about the customer and how to know how I impacted individuals. So I think that was very important. I think the fact that I had the fortune to play baseball here, I think being on a team, you can't lead a team if you can't be on a team. And as you know, baseball is a very individual sport. Everybody's got their own little statistics. Everybody works individually, but if you don't come together as a team, you don't win championships. So I think that was also a very valuable experience to me, is just being a part of a team in understanding, seeing how individuals work together on that starts to define your leadership characteristics, I think.
What advice would you give to students who want to become great leaders?
Well, I think, I guess I would start with sell something. And I don't care if it's an idea or if it's a product, if it's a service, what it is, but I think it really does have to do with figuring, deciding how you can convince people to do something, because that's what leadership is all about, I think. I think it's also about just getting on the field to play and starting down the field. As I talk to many people, I tell them it's not relay. There's not a defined lane where everybody runs in their lane for a while and passes the baton in a certain lane. Becoming a leader is really about, is kind of like the rugby. It's rugby, not relay. You grab the ball and you start down the field, and you start to see what your skills are, how you fit in just taking action when it's required. So I think just getting in the game and starting to play, being a part of a team, those are very important to developing your leadership. Another thing is just watching other people. You should steal shamelessly from leaders you respect. You see people that make presentations that really are impactful to you. Well, what did they do? Or you see somebody that's written you a handwritten note saying thank you and the impact it has on your motivation. Well, you can do the same thing for somebody else. So I think stealing ideas from other leaders that you respect was also very critical to develop my leadership skills. Then you have the normal formal training. Fortunately in an IBM, we had a lot of formal training in how to manage people and the processes you go through. I think all that's very, it's all those pieces together that help you start to develop your own individual style. Because you're not going to be a leader like somebody else. You're going to be your own kind of leader. Some people are going to be rah-rah leaders, some are quiet, some tell great stories, some are funny, but you've got to figure out what you put together to make yourself unique in terms of your own individual style, I think.
What can universities do to support leadership development?
Well, I think, first of all, you've got to prepare people to do their job. So I think the university's always done a terrific job of that. I think what you're doing with the Leadership Institute is another terrific example, because you're giving the students exposure to people who have actually been in the real world, accomplished things, who have a lot of different ideas about what leadership characteristics are, because they'll get 100 different views of that. But they get to see that diversity. And they get to see that, not everybody does it the same way. Everybody approaches it differently. They got there in a different way. So there's not one formula for what's going to make you successful in that. But I think those type of programs where you really focus on what does it take to be a leader are very valuable, because even if you're just going to be the best at your profession, you're going to be the greatest designer of this product, you've got to sell people on that idea, and you've got to provide leadership in that way.
How has globalization impacted leadership?
Well, it's made it a lot more complex, for sure. First of all, just the fact that if you're going to be a leader, you need to show up. And the time required to show up around the world is massive. It's a terrific, it's a significant time management tool. But I also think that it makes you refine the way you communicate. If you, for example, when I was running Asia Pacific, and you go into different countries who they speak the language but not fluently, so how do you communicate to those people? They see you in 15-minute increments. How do you communicate a message that you'd like for them to take away so that they understand it and get it? Because certain things don't travel. Your humor doesn't travel, your colloquialisms don't travel. So it's complex in terms of time, in terms of communication skills, assessing the talent, trying to pick leaders that fit their culture, because you want in-country leadership to really drive those businesses. But how do you know which skill sets really work and relate in that country or culture is just a much more complex problem. And then you've got all the ethics and compliance issues, which there are different customs and ways people do business, and you got to get people to conform to the way you want the company to run. So it really adds a lot of complexity. I think it adds terrifically to the innovation of a company, because you have to have different products and services. You get diversity of ideas. All that is a great thing, but it's tough. It's tough to get people to move back and forth, particularly someone that's in a small country that you want to have a big job, and they got to move their whole life to the United States. Maybe that's very difficult.
What key events or people were instrumental in putting you on the path to leadership?
Well, I think you get started by the people you hang out with the most, and so it starts with your family, I think. My dad, who didn't finish 10th grade, was probably the most confident, optimistic person you'll ever want to meet. His favorite saying was, "Everything happens for the best." He felt he could have done anything, and as I mentioned before, my struggle was with developing that confidence level. But I could see him, and I can hear him. He had that kind of confidence in me, and it's people developing confidence in you, I think, that gives you confidence. So he certainly was a great influence. My mother, same way. She taught me different things. I think I always was fortunate that people kind of trusted me. They felt comfortable with me, I guess, and I think I got some of those traits from my mother, although I can't really describe them. I think that's where they came from. So you certainly get it from your parents. My wife, Carol, gave me a sense of balance, I think. So certainly those are the people that got you started and supported you all the way up. But along the way, you find a few mentors who you don't find them; they find you. I think mentoring works best when they find you. You don't go ask for them; they ask for you. But as I was telling a little bit earlier, the story about staying in the field longer. My first branch manager, he did that because he thought it was the best for me for my long-term career, and it didn't feel good at the time, but I think he was absolutely right. And then a little bit later, in about mid-career, I had another mentor who, there was a job opening in Indianapolis. I really had no credentials to be even on the candidate list, but he saw something in me that he said, he can do a lot of things in this company. I'm going to take a risk and put him in that job, and he had to work through the company to make that happen. And so when people take a risk in you like that, you feel very accountable to them to make sure that they were right. And so those people were probably the three, the five people that probably influenced me the most, because I think most of your influence comes early in terms of who you are. And I like to use this statement that, you know, in being a leader, I think the most important things is you're too young for Ernest Tubb, but Ernest Tubb was an old country western star in the 1950s, and he had this saying about being a great songwriter, and I think it's true about being a great leader. It's clarity of thought and individual style. And I think as you develop those things and you get people to have confidence in you, that's where leadership comes from.
Great insights, David. Thank you very much.
Thank you.